Welcome, everyone. I'm Stephen Haden. My pronouns are he and him. I live in the beautiful Rockies in Colorado. Happen to be in Breckenridge this week for a mental health conference. So starting to see colors of fall peeping up around me with some of the gorgeous aspens here. If you would, and you feel comfortable, please share your name and your pronouns and where you are this evening. I'm grateful to be in community with you tonight. Quick background, I'm a trained social worker, I'm a therapist. I'm also the founder of a nonprofit that's focused on supporting the mental health and well-being of the LGBTQ community. And as part of that, we have a new wellness platform and smartphone app launching early next year called You Flourish. So we'll share some information about that at the end of our session tonight. Tonight, we'll be talking about intersectionality and how that shows up for us in the community. But let's start, as we always do each week, with a motivational message to help center and focus us for our conversation tonight. Each of you carry the extraordinary tapestry of your own identity and life experiences. Your journey is a story of resilience, love, and authenticity. It's a reminder that you are not defined by one thing. You are a vibrant blend of perspectives, histories, and emotions. As you listen in tonight and engage in this exploration of our shared experiences, celebrate the incredible strength that arises from embracing your authentic self. Your existence is a manifestation of resilience, a testament to the love you carry for yourself and a powerful force for change in the world. Together, we embark on a journey to navigate the challenges that may come your way, knowing that each step forward is a testament to your courage and collective strength of our community. You stand united with each of us in believing that every person, regardless of their intersectional identities, deserves the utmost respect, understanding, and support. Let's all work together to create a world where we honor and uplift the importance of intersectionality, in a world where your unique story is not just acknowledged, but celebrated as a source of strength and resilience. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining. I appreciate the comments in the chat. Kathleen, welcome from Northern California. Rachel, welcome back from Boston. Hi, Joshua. So glad you're joining us from Alberta, Canada tonight. Drea, welcome from New Orleans. Great city for sure. Nanny, welcome from Puerto Rico. Megan, of course, a colleague, also joining from Colorado. Good evening, Morgan. Thank you for joining us from Nova Scotia, Canada. I'm so glad you all are here tonight. So as I mentioned, we'll be talking about intersectionality within the LGBTQ community. And really just for starters, what does that mean to you when you hear the word intersectionality?
Stephen, I can jump in here. This is Megan. Happy to be here with everybody. So for me, when I think about intersectionality, what comes to mind is that every unique person has their own unique lived experiences, and that can look different based on our own identity. So for me, for example, I am a cisgender white woman, so I identify as the sex that I was assigned at birth. And that means that my identity holds privilege. And then there's also perhaps parts of my identity that don't hold as much privilege as that.
Thanks, Megan, for sharing that. Yeah, and to provide a little context for those who may not be familiar with kind of the genesis of this perspective, it comes from Black feminist activism in the United States. It's a term that was first coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, a civil rights activist and legal scholar, back in 1989. And in that paper, she talked about, thinking about how our various identities intersect to create either risk or protective factors that allow us or inhibit our ability to navigate the world. When you think about how intersectionality can be used to understand social inequality, think about a Black transgender woman. She may face discrimination based on race, gender, and sexual orientation. So that's an example of where those various intersecting identities can create increased stressors for that person. And in some cases, depending on your identity, in my case, I am a white cisgender gay man. I have identities that in this country provide some privilege and act as protective factors. I wish that wasn't the case, but that's the world in which we live. And so I think it's incredibly important that we understand intersectionality because it's a powerful tool for both understanding and addressing the complex ways in which social inequities exist and interact with one another. And I feel very strongly in my clinical practice and our work at Envision U that it's essential for creating a more just and equitable society for everyone. Kind of a heavy topic, I know. So I'm going to ask the group, can you share your own experiences of intersectionality? Would you feel comfortable either in the chat or voice sharing some of your identities and how they intersect with you? Calvin, do I have that pronunciation?
Yeah, it's Calvin.
Great. Okay, Calvin.
Yeah. For me, and honestly, even in this conversation, I realized I have not really took the time to consider the concept of intersectionality and really reflected on it. I kind of took the route after coming out of just kind of avoiding the reality of it. I came out a few years ago, and I remember one of the first things my dad said is I worry about you because you're a double minority. And I never really understood what he meant by that. And I asked him, what do you mean? He said, well, not only are you gay in a culture that we don't even acknowledge it or really accept it, but you're also a brown man. And I think that, just that acknowledgement, somebody actually saying it was scary enough for me that I just chose to avoid it and really didn't even consider it. And I feel in order to, I don't know, I guess compensate for it, I just find a lot of, I identify, and I feel sometimes over-identify with the fact that I'm a gay male, almost using it as a way to, almost using it as a crutch in some conversations too when the conversation gets hard. So, my relationship with this, I really haven't given it much thought up until now.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And it's really interesting. Your father's response to your coming out was, in not putting words, but just sort of paraphrasing what you said, which is, you're going to encounter some extra challenges in life as both a person who identifies as a person of color, but also as a gay person as well. And that's where we get those dual stigmatized identities, right? Where it increases the risk factors that you might experience. And this falls all within the context of a theory called minority stress theory. It's a social psychologist who came up with this idea. And I want to acknowledge that I don't like the use of the name minority stress theory. That's what it's called in literature. But for our conversation tonight, I'm going to call it social stress theory, socially stigmatized stress theory. And the reason for that is the use of the word minority is not strength-based. I think it's actually harmful, and it's not also representative of the population that we're speaking about. But the idea behind this psychological framework is it helps us understand the unique stressors and challenges faced by social groups like those who are part of the LGBTQ community, racial and ethnic groups, or other stigmatized groups. And so it just helps put into context all of those unique stressors that Calvin, your father, was probably speaking about without much detail. I wonder what other folks think when they hear the term intersectionality and how that might apply in their own life. And you're certainly welcome to put comments in the chat if that feels more comfortable to you. And so, just sort of like adding some additional context here, right? So each of us is made up of potentially dozens of different identities, and those can include where we live. If we grew up in a small or rural community, that certainly shapes our worldview. If we grew up or are still practicing a particular religious faith, that's part of our identity. Are we able-bodied? Do we have underlying mental health issues? That's an important part of our identity. I'm a person in recovery. I've been in recovery for 18 years, just recently celebrated that milestone. And that's an important part of my identity, right? I'm a gay man. I'm white. I did grow up in a small Midwestern town. I'm also a person in recovery. These are the things that make up who I am. And so, and when you start thinking about gender identity, particularly if your gender is, if you identify as gender nonconforming or non-binary or transgender, that's creating some additional societal stressors that you are going to experience that somebody like me who's cisgender won't. Does anyone have an identity they would want to share with the group tonight that may not be something that folks could readily determine about them just simply by looking at them or talking to them? Hi, Kathleen. Welcome.
Hi. Well, I raised my hand right before you asked that question. But yeah, I fit that bill. So I am a white woman, and I am pansexual, and nobody would know that by looking at me. Sometimes I will identify as bisexual because it's not the same, but it's sort of, I guess, the closest to that, if you will. I don't even like saying that because it is different, but it's and I have mental health issues. I have all my life, and now I've been through a significant amount of trauma, and I'm healing from that. And a divorce 6 years ago. That's part of the trauma. And I really haven't dated or put myself out there, I mean, much at all in 6 years. And I don't know if it's really fear. I am just trying to heal. But I think, it has been long enough that I'm starting to think about it, and I'm thinking about things like this. I don't know. The last time I really dated, it was the 1990s. So it's very different now, and just everything's different now. So I don't know exactly. I'd never heard the term intersectionality. I'm really glad to be here, but so that's me. And if you can shine any light on any of this, that would be amazing. I'm just kind of learning as I go as well.
Well, thanks so much, Kathleen, for sharing. And yes, it's often those not as easily discovered identities that make us who we are, our really unique selves, and what makes us quite special, right? And to have identities that maybe the world doesn't see or fully understand can also pose potential risk for us, right? Like, when is it safe to disclose? If I do disclose, what are people going to think about me? And I liked how you were sort of struggling with, when I talk about it this way as bisexuality, it's not really that, but maybe that's something that most people can kind of understand a little bit easier than they would otherwise. And I think at times we negotiate with ourselves, right? We determine, okay, who is it that I can be my full authentic self with, and where might it not be safe to do that? And that's certainly an important consideration. We know we live in a country, sadly, that is rife with racism, homophobia, transphobia. A person's physical safety, in fact, their life could be at risk if we don't exercise caution. So I think it's unfortunate that we do need to be mindful of what disclosure looks like, and how can we, in groups like this, in the communities that we're in, connect with other people who both share and also celebrate the identities that we have, so that we can truly live our authentic selves. We can navigate the world with our head high, knowing that I am confident and courageous for who I am, and I know there's no one else like me. Yes, Morgan, welcome. So glad you're here.
Thank you. And thank you so much for running this group. I was just, thinking about, in terms of any identity that that I have that most people wouldn't guess I have, is that I am non-binary trans. I am agender, as in genderless. And I don't identify or feel particularly mask, so I tend to dress in clothes, as I generally, as I like to say, in a space where it feels safe from the women's side of the store. So most people, even often in trans spaces, will not realize that I am actually not there as an ally, that I am there because I'm trans myself. So it's an interesting place to occupy. I've been out as trans for about 10 years now. And at first I found it kind of troubling when I would go into trans spaces and people would assume that I was a cis woman ally. And now I'm pretty comfortable with, politely just saying, oh no, I'm actually agender, but I still find that really hard to do when I'm in a space where, as far as I know, I'm the only trans or non-binary person present. I get anxious, and I usually won't disclose unless I feel like there's someone there who would get it. So yeah, I very much know what you mean about those kinds of intersections and needing to be mindful of what kind of space you're in when you're disclosing certain identities.
Thanks, Morgan, for sharing. And I want to highlight something that I think is is crucial to this conversation about intersectionality. Historically, within the lesbian, gay, and bisexual communities, trans and gender nonconforming and non-binary people have not always been welcomed. In fact, there's been at times a particularly hostile relationship. And so when we think about, we talk about LGBTQ plus, right, today, and it sounds very inclusive, as it should be, but that's not always the case. And so when I think about the patients that I work with who are trans, trying to find community is not always as easy as saying, oh, I'm just going to go to the gay bar down the street, because that may not actually be the safe space for them. That may not be the affirming place for them, and how unfortunate that is. And so, being mindful of where it's safe to come out with all of our identities can vary even within the queer community. We've seen progress, but not enough for sure. Nanny, good evening. Welcome. Good to see you tonight. Glad you're here.
Hello. Thank you so much. Yeah, this is my first group. So thank you for the space. I identify as a Hispanic cisgender lesbian. But lately, I have been having, I would say, some difficulties expressing my preferences. I feel like even though I'm at the age that I am still like in that exploring stage again, after I had already identified as a lesbian for many years. So it's a little bit difficult for me to, even in these type of, rooms or places, to talk about it, even though my whole life I have been very open about my sexuality. Now it's becoming a little bit harder because of, and not even because of my race, because like someone had mentioned before, I've never really seen that factor play in like in my life, but just like seeing the change in my, and just exploring different aspects of my sexuality is kind of hard for me because I'm at the age I am, I think, which I know it shouldn't be that way, but just for me it feels like that. Because usually society, thinks that we should already know by a certain age, or what our definite preference is, and so that has been really hard for me to speak up about, whether it's to family who are very open to my sexuality, and or to my partner or to anybody else. So yeah, this is the first time that I'm actually speaking on it. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you for being here and having the courage to share that with us. I hear you talk about, there's this sort of expectation that as we grow older, that we are going to have finality around certain things, that we are going to have definitive answers around all of our identities by a certain age. And so I would just offer you some grace to say that that's not true, that as we age, we experience new and different things. We encounter people with different identities than our own. Perhaps that sparks some curiosity that we didn't know that existed within us before, but now we're able to explore something that we didn't know had existed. And so as part of all of our journeys, yours, mine, and everyone that's joined us tonight, I do hope that we can be open to those possibilities, whatever those might be and where that leads us. I am an older gay man, but I'm so encouraged when I talk to young people who have really embraced the term queer, rather than identifying with that acronym LGBTQ. And one of the reasons that I really like it is that it doesn't force us to check a box, right? Straight, gay, lesbian, right? We get to just use queer as an umbrella that can embrace our gender identity, our gender expression, our sexual orientation. It gives us the fluidity to decide that today this is who I love, and tomorrow that may be very different. How I show up in the world next week may look different than it will in 2 weeks. And what's important is it's individualized, it's specific to you, and that's who you are in that moment. And maybe the world's not ready for that. And guess what? We don't care, right? We care about our ability to live our authentic lives. And so at times that may cause some discomfort. It may place a strain on the relationships that with people that we have who say, well, gosh, why can't you just figure this thing out? And the response is, I don't have to figure anything out. This is who I am today, and I love myself for that. I wonder if anyone else has something to share about their own journey in exploring their identity and maybe feeling pressured at times from families or friends or society in general to check a box.
Yeah, I would actually love to chip in on this one. Hello everyone, Chelsea here. I kind of joke that my mom is a really good litmus test. She's kind of your typical Gen Xer. When I first used the word queer around her, she got offended, as a cis straight woman. It was kind of funny because she's like, wait, I thought that was a bad word, which understandably, right? The time she came from when she heard that word, it wasn't it wasn't okay. It was derogatory and it was meant to cause pain. And so I wouldn't say I try and articulate too much. I think sometimes baby steps is a little bit easier just to help kind of aid in like digesting, what is kind of a difficult conversation. And also like we have a lot of terminology and, even just kind of sussing out that there are different forms of attraction, like so you might be romantically attracted to one person or one gender but not another, and the breadth of the queer community and the human experience just not being able to really be boxed in, I think has made me realize that the thing that I really kind of center on is when I have these conversations, I know that people saw me years ago and how unhappy I was and how I was an angry teenager, to be totally honest. I was frustrated because myself and my experience didn't make sense, especially being from where I am. And I just kind of frame it as like, even if this makes you uncomfortable, even if you don't fully understand this, I just hope that you can see that I really am happier. I'm a happier, healthier version of myself. And I think that that's a good way to really ground that conversation.
Thank you, Chelsea, for sharing. Really helpful perspective. Anyone else have something to offer in terms of either a hidden identity that they're reluctant to share, maybe it's not safe to share, or just how they are navigating a world where maybe one of your identities is a protective factor, and maybe another is a risk factor for how you can integrate your life into a world that has some pretty rigid structures in place. Well, let me ask this. How can we as a society work to create more inclusive and supportive spaces for queer folks? What are some things that each of us can do individually? And what are the things we can do from an advocacy perspective to really push change? And whether that's change in our family systems or community, within the workplace or in politics, I'd love to hear from you all, any ideas that you have, how we can build a more inclusive and supportive spaces for queer folks.
Yeah, I can jump in. I think something that first comes to mind for me is just becoming aware of when we are making assumptions um, about other folks' identities. What kind of made me think of that was, Morgan, you had shared some experiences of going into spaces and people making assumptions about your identity, and that hurts. That's extremely personal. So I think that all of us can become more aware of when we do it, because that's an example of something that, like, implicit bias, right? We may not even be aware in our mind that it's happening. And I think starting to be intentional about becoming aware of that is something really important that we can do.
Thanks, Megan. Yeah, that awareness piece is really important. I think about this not only in terms of the awareness that we have regarding who we are, but part of this exercise in understanding intersectionality is also about understanding maybe the biases that we have. Right? I talked earlier about some of the discrimination that happens within the queer community against trans and gender nonconforming folks, right? And so checking those biases, understand where those are coming from, and then working to dismantle them, right? So whether it's dismantling transphobia, dismantling racism, whether it's dismantling the tenets of white supremacy that guide so much of how we work in this country and how we interact with the systems that have so much domination over our life, whether it's government, banking, commerce. Any thoughts there about how we can consider the biases we may have regarding other people's identities?
Just to kind of briefly jump back in, I think Stephen and Megan, I think you both make a really good point about the biases, and I'm kind of wondering, going back to like what we can do, I really feel that the best way to step forward is to understand, right? Have dialogue, have conversations, and maybe with people who don't share identities, maybe people who don't look like us. But I really, especially given the trend of book banning and all that, really fun stuff, I'm really hoping that we can kind of return to roots of like learning about queer history. I think the more we know how much it took for people to really fight, like I as a white person from South Dakota didn't know about Stonewall until I think I was like 26. And that's just really, there are so many components about human history and even just the rights that, people have because of Black and brown and queer and trans, like women. There are so many things we don't know about, and I really feel that we have a lot of work to do just to start sharing stories and learning about what we don't know about.
Yeah, thanks, Chelsea. Understanding and respecting intersectionality can only happen through that education, right? So taking the time to both learn about the concept of intersectionality and its importance, right? Which is, reading books, maybe watching a documentary, finding information that helps you get a better understanding of what this means. Another thing that I think is important in all of our relationships, but certainly relevant here, is actively listening to a person's experiences and feelings without judgment. I want to create safe spaces for open and honest communication with the people in our lives. And that's not always easy to do, but it's so important. Both understand who that person is and to celebrate who they are. I think about acknowledging differences. So sadly, for our friends in Canada, as you've unfortunately witnessed over the last couple of years, we've become such a divided and polarized nation in so many ways. And it's difficult to acknowledge differences respectfully, right? We might have a difference of opinion. Hopefully, in a conversation, you might shed light. I'm going to use you, Joshua, for this purpose, that you might shed light on a perspective that I hadn't taken into account. And through a respectful conversation, we can acknowledge our differences, but maybe come to a consensus, or at the very least, a better understanding of why you see something the way you do and why I hold my perspective. Mental health is such a crucial part of this whole series, but it's very relevant here. And when we think about the people in our lives, whether it's family, colleagues, friends, who all possess these various intersectional identities, it's important to understand that those with multiple stigmatized identities, right? We heard earlier about the experience that Calvin had when he had come out to his father, that when you have those compounding marginalized identities, the risk for mental health issues goes up pretty dramatically. And so it's important for us to be good friends, good counterparts to other people, to respect that, if you do have multiple marginalized identities, the likelihood is that you are going to be experiencing some greater stressors in your life and potentially some mental health challenges. And the last thing I will say on this, as we think about intersectionality and some of the work that we can do, check our privilege, right? So it's so important to understand the privileges that you have, how those privilege may affect the interactions that you have with other people. And this is where we have the opportunity, those that have privilege can use our privilege to uplift those folks who don't have a voice. We have the opportunity to advocate for change, to be engaged in movements that create safer communities for all people, right? And that's how, we can, in some ways, that we can use our privilege. But as I share some of those things about how we can increase our awareness and understanding and be respectful of intersectionality, I wonder, does anyone have other ideas of things that they either are currently doing in their life or they're thinking they might do as a result of the conversation we're having tonight? All right. Let me ask a different question, and hopefully this will spark some engagement, because I think it's a really interesting one to consider. What are some potential areas of collaboration between different social justice movements? Let's think of feminism, racial justice, and LGBTQ rights to address intersectionality effectively. So when we think about social justice movements, thinking about feminism, racial justice, and the rights of queer people, what are some things that we can do together to advance the power and privilege of each of those identities in a world that is often hostile to each of them?
Yeah, go ahead, Kathleen.
So I don't really know what to do about this. Although I am an advocate for many people. But I think I know that I can't make, and we can't make everybody in the world see things the way that we do. But I think a big thing, not the only thing, but a big thing that those three things that you're talking about have in common is that we have the right, and we should be treated equal, whether we're a woman or a man, and no matter who we love and what race we are. You know, these are things that are we were, born. We didn't have a choice really about any of these things, and even if we did, that's fine. And I don't know that I'm saying, I feel like I can't find my footing in addressing this. I'm glad Rachel's raising her hand. But it just baffles me that we can't just clearly see that the things about us, people need to look deeper. Are we good people? Do we love? Do we like to help people? Are we productive in society in whatever way we can be, whether we are able-bodied or not? Not what color is our skin, or what gender, or who we love. And I wish there was a way, or I knew of a way, to come together and just really shout that from the rooftops, and somehow make some people understand that or see that.
Thank you, Kathleen. And yes, I think that is indeed often the opportunity, right? Which is to holler from the rooftop and let people know we're here and that we are proud of who we are and all the contributions that we make to the world. And then that builds the confidence and courage for us to navigate a world that seems often so hostile. And yet, let's celebrate the diversity that's within the queer community and all of the accomplishments, incredible moments in history that queer people have contributed to, advancements in science, in the arts, right? Throughout history and politics and other places, we've seen such great achievements by queer people. And so, whether it's in the classroom teaching young people and preparing them for the future, or working at NASA, about to command a spaceship, queer people are everywhere, contributing to society and to life in really incredible ways. Rachel.
Yeah, thank you. So sort of piggybacking on what Kathleen had said, and going back to your question prior about like what can we do after like having this conversation tonight. And so advocacy is important to me in many different capacities, and one of the quotes that like sparks that advocacy is scream so that 100 years from now another person will not have to dry their tears wondering where in history they lost their voice. And I think sort of in like what's so hard for me, I think, to comprehend is that we are living in a world with, you know, a lot of internalized isms. And I think that like not saying anything at all and not using my voice is colluding like with the problem we have at hand. And given that you know, the identities of individuals, and you were talking about like increased health issues, and I think for me just having a voice and going to different places. So like I'm very blessed to live in the Boston area, and there is an organization called like the Fenway that is like primarily to support like resources for LGBTQIA plus. And I had worked at a domestic violence shelter in 2012 in the Boston area, and at that time we were the only domestic violence shelter that was accepting like men or trans men. And I think, you know, putting together a list of resources and getting that into the hands of people that need it so that they can feel supported is critical. And I also think, you know, as somebody who does have a voice, that it's super important to educate, but like you said, it's also about, you know, for me, also sitting back and just listening and recognizing my place and trying to get a better picture of each individual's lived experiences and to be able to support them for simply that.
Thank you so much. And a number of people were asking where the quote came from. And so I put the source in the chat, Rachel, but did you want to share anything more about why the words of that poem mean so much to you?
Sure. So I can just share briefly that like some intersectionalities that I have. I am a white cisgender woman who is disabled. I also have dissociative identity disorder, and I have a lot of medical issues where I have been done wrong by physicians or you know, clinicians in hospitals, essentially being told that I'm not being believed, and that and because I do have mental health issues, like, oh, that's your mental health, that's just anxiety. And just anxiety is also like, I don't like that phrasing because anxiety is very real and debilitating. But I think for me, after I lost my fertility as a result of endometriosis completely unnecessarily, I had to step outside that box and start making waves and taking deep dives into researching and using a voice for individuals that don't have a voice yet. And so that for me feels pretty powerful in a lot of different ways. And it also, I'll just speak to, like, there's not a ton of resources on dissociative identity disorder that people like really understand that, and having so many identities inside one body is challenging in a unique way, and deciding whether or not to self-disclose, again, like you said, can be a really challenging thing. But I don't know, I think for me, like, people are always like, oh, we're waiting for this person to do that or this person to do that, and it's like, no, I personally need to get off the sidelines because I am the person we have been waiting for, even if it's just at home, starting at home with acceptance and unconditional love. You know, I think that can start to have a ripple effect, and that makes a big difference.
It absolutely does. Thank you so much for sharing and your vulnerability and self-love, changing that that negative voice inside us and pushing back against the hateful rhetoric, the discrimination, the assumptions that people make about us is so important. I'm going to invite my colleague Megan in. As you all know, we often wrap up our sessions with a guided meditation. I'd like to do the meditation tonight and then leave ourselves just a couple of minutes to reflect on the meditation before we wrap up for tonight. Megan, could I invite you in to share our meditation for the evening?
Definitely. Thanks, Stephen. All right, so I invite everybody to find a comfortable space and position for your body, whether that's seated, maybe that's standing up, laying down. I invite you to close your eyes or keep them open, a soft gaze looking ahead of you, whatever feels most comfortable. And just take a deep breath in and let go of any tension that you're carrying in your body. And this meditation will guide you to embrace the richness of LGBTQ plus intersectionality and celebrate the pride that is within all of us. So first I'd like to take a grounding breath. So I invite everyone to inhale deeply, filling your lungs, and exhale slowly, releasing any stress or worry. You can go ahead and repeat that at your own pace with each breath, imagining yourself becoming more grounded and centered. And as you continue with that breath, I'd like you to picture a vibrant, ever-expanding web of interconnected threads. And each of these threads represents a different aspect of your identity. Maybe it's your LGBTQ plus identity, your ethnicity, your culture, your abilities, and more. And see how they all intersect and weave together, forming the beautiful tapestry that is uniquely you. And as you visualize your intersectionality, I invite you to imagine a warm, glowing light at the core of your being. And this light represents your inner strength, resilience, and courage. And while you continue on with that breath, allow this light to grow brighter, filling you with a sense of pride for everything you have overcome and achieved. And I'd like you to bring to mind those moments in your life when you've triumphed over adversity or embraced your authentic self. And visualize these achievements as bright stars in the night sky, each one as a testament to your strength and your resilience. Finally, I'd like you to envision a circle of LGBTQ plus individuals, each representing a different intersection of identity. See the beauty in this diversity and recognize that it is our collective strength that propels us forward. And you can reach out to your fellow community members, holding hands in unity. And as you continue with that breath, I invite you to envision holding hands with your community and feeling that surge of pride, that warm light radiating from within to without your body. And then I invite you all to repeat the following affirmations, either in your mind or out loud. Maybe even writing them down can help. I am proud of every aspect of my identity. My intersectionality, my unique identities are my strengths. I am a part of a diverse and resilient LGBTQ plus community. And finally, I celebrate the unique tapestry that is uniquely me. I invite you all to take a moment, see if any of those affirmations maybe stuck with you a little bit, and to take a few deep breaths, gradually returning your awareness to the present moment, to your body, whatever nice position you found yourself in. And when you're ready, if you had a steady gaze or if your eyes were closed, I invite you to slowly open them, carrying with you the sense of intersectional pride and empowerment that I hope that you've cultivated during our meditation today. And I'd like you to remember that your unique intersectionality is a source of strength and pride. Embrace it, celebrate it, and share it with the world. We invite you to carry this pride with you as you navigate life's journey, knowing that you are a beacon of intersectional pride and a symbol of resilience and unity within this beautiful community.
Thank you so much, Megan. That was beautiful. All right, we've got just about a minute left and just wanted to see if folks had a reaction they wanted to put in the chat. Any other comments they want to share tonight? As you leave, we would appreciate any feedback from our group tonight. That would be very helpful. Next week, we'll be here at the same time, Thursday, October 5th, 7 p.m. Pacific time, 10 p.m. Eastern time. And for those of us in Colorado, we'll be here at 8 p.m. Mountain time. Megan, can you remind us what the topic for next week will be?
Yes, let me pull that up.
And thanks so much for the comments in the chat. Really appreciate you all being here tonight, and we really hope you'll join us next week as well.
Yes, and next week we'll be talking about supportive allies and how that contributes to building a positive environment.
Wonderful. Well, be well in the week ahead. Know that you're part of a vibrant, beautiful community, and we hope to be in community with you next week. Thanks so much, and have a good evening.
Thanks, everyone.